Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Fatal Attraction Part 4. This is the tragic life of Travis Alexander. When we last left off, we had talked about how Jody would start seeing Matt while she was seeing her boyfriend Bobby in Medford, Oregon. And eventually Bobby would catch on when he would come home from work one day and find the two in bed. Eventually, Jody and Matt would get their own apartment and they would date for several years. And eventually, Jody would start having feelings that Matt was being unfaithful as Bobby had been in the past. And eventually, the two would break up but still be living together. And like before with Bobby, she would follow Matt to the library one day, and she then would hack into his Gmail account. And Jody would hack into his account, and she would find that Matt had actually been seeing a mutual friend of theirs, Bianca. And Jody would then get inside of her car and drive over to Bianca's house, who would live in another town. And she would drive right up to her house and knock on the door and confront her about seeing Matt. Eventually, Bianca would tell Matt about this, and the two would have a complete falling out. After the falling out, Jody would pack up her bags and move back to California, but this time she would move to Big Sur, California, and she would begin working at a hotel. But Jody's employment at the hotel would not be long, and it should be noted that Jody had a very, very big habit of never really staying at an employment very, very long. She was often jumping from job to job to job. And she would eventually apply at a holiday resort where she would be interviewed by 42-year-old divorcee Daryl Brewer. The two would actually work together for about a year and then would begin dating. And as I'd said before, Brewer was a 42-year-old divorcee, and he had a son that he had custody of. And once their relationship had began, he would be very upfront with Jody and tell her that he had no intentions of getting married or anything, and had just mainly wanted to just enjoy their time with each other, which Jody had told Brewer that she was completely okay with. But into their relationship, Brewer had noticed that Jody would start making some changes, especially after meeting his ex-wife. Brewer would claim that after meeting his ex-wife, Jody would make some slight cosmetic changes, and would go as far to say that right after meeting his ex-wife, Jody would then go dye her hair blonde, just at the exact same color as his ex-wife had. And later on, Jody would get breast augmentations around the same size that his ex-wife was. And Jody would even go as far to say to getting a red car exactly like the kind that his ex-wife drove. And Brewer would just say that over a period of time, Jody would just almost mask and mirror herself to be completely a younger version of his ex-wife. In 2005, Jody would actually purchase a home in Palm Springs, California, and would get 2 full-time jobs so she could cover the bills and the mortgage. But it should also be noticed that the house that she would buy in Palm Springs would be relatively close to Daryl Brewer's house. And this way, Jody could be within a walking distance, not just to Daryl, but his 4-year-old son. And as I said before, she was constantly jumping from job to job. And with her bills and her mortgage, she started going around asking around people for financial tools that she can make more money. And eventually, a friend of hers would hand her a pamphlet CD for prepaid legal. Jody would later say that she would let it sit around for 3 months before she would actually listen to it. Eventually, on a hunch, Jody would pick up the CD and begin listening to it, and listening to this pamphlet talking about how she could start her own business and start making around 6 figures. And taking a gamble, she would attend a prepaid legal conference in 2006, and there she would meet Travis Alexander. According to sources, Travis and Jody would actually hit it off from the very beginning on that night. And sources would say that Travis would approach Jody and the two would begin flirting back and forth and begin talking most of the night. Eventually, Travis would invite her to an executive meeting, but Jody would be really discouraged because she did not have enough money to purchase a formal dress. Travis would actually send a text message and tell his friend Sky Hughes about this girl that he had met at the conference. And Jody would be very discouraged and talk to Sky about how she didn't have money to buy a formal dress. But this particular night, Sky would actually be her fairy godmother in disguise and would invite her up to her room and would ask her to try on several formal dresses she had brought to the convention. And ironically, one of them would fit to where Jody would put one on and attend the meeting with Travis Alexander and Chris and Sky Hughes. And for the most part, Jody left a really good impression with Chris and Sky. It wasn't until the next morning when Travis would text them and tell them that she had still lived with her ex-boyfriend in Big Sur, California. And this immediately would set off some red flags to where they would tell Travis, you need to talk to her about why she's still living with this guy and so on. So Travis would ask Jody why she was still living with her ex-boyfriend or why the relationship ended in the first place. To where Jody would tell him that he wasn't interested in getting married and having kids, and she wanted to get married and have kids. But Daryl Brewer would actually tell a completely different story, and he would tell people that by the time that Jody had went to the conference and she had met Travis, they were technically still together. And he would tell people later on that they technically would not split up until December of 2006. 1 week after the convention, Jody would actually make a little vacation over to Riverside, where Travis would be visiting Chris and Sky Hughes. While on the trip that following Sunday, Chris, Sky, and Travis would actually attend a Mormon service, and they would take Jody with them. After service, Jody would express an interest in the Mormon faith, which this would make Travis very excited, being that, as you all know now, Mormon was a big thing for Travis. And he would tell Jody that he would make the necessary preparations to talk to a missionary Mormon and also a Mormon bishop to make her first steps into the faith. This also had a big part for Travis because as he was potentially looking to date Jody, her having interest in being a Mormon as well was also a big thing for him. And this is just something that Jody would do, where she would just kind of make these masks and this front to make herself more appeasable to the person that she was interested in dating. Just like with Brewer, where she would completely mask herself and make herself out to be the younger version of his ex-wife. With Travis, she was masking herself and trying to put on this front that she was this perfect, sweet, little innocent Mormon girl. And it should also be noted that around this time, she would go back home to Daryl Brewer and would start telling him that she was not going to have sex with him anymore because she was saving herself for marriage because of her new Mormon faith. But she would also be making frequent trips to see Travis and having sex with him. And this would go on up until Jody would actually end the relationship with Daryl Brewer. Sky Hughes would later recall one afternoon that Jody would contact her and express her excitement because she would say that Travis had called and asked her to move to Arizona with him, and was talking that herself and Travis had been talking about marriage and making their relationship official. But when Sky would contact Travis, he would have a completely different story and would say he'd never brought up marriage to Jody Arias, and he never told her to come move with him in Arizona, being that they had only known each other a few months. And after this conversation, it would raise more red flags with Sky Hughes.